Have you ever stopped to think that the history of humanity is, in essence, an incessant search for something greater? A search for meaning, for power, a connection with the divine. But what if I told you that there was a moment in history, such a bold and challenging event, that the foundation of human communication itself has been changed forever? A monumental project, driven by an unprecedented ambition that culminated in such an unexpected divine punishment that few really understand its depth and implications for today's world. Imagine a world where everyone spoke the same language. A world of unity, of shared purpose, where collaboration was fluid and the barriers of understanding simply did not exist. It sounds utopian, doesn't it? A dream of global harmony. But that's exactly how the story of the Babel Tower began. A united humanity, not in worship and submission to the Creator, but in a direct challenge to His sovereignty. They didn't just want to build a city to dwell. They wanted to build a tower whose summit reached the heavens, a monument to their own glory and power, a meeting point to avoid the dispersion that God had explicitly commanded after the flood. This disobedience was not just a whim, but a rebellion against the divine plan for humanity. However, there are crucial details that most people are unaware of this biblical episode. Details that reveal the real reason behind divine judgment. And more importantly, what this millennial story still has to teach us about communication, unity, and faith these days, in an increasingly connected, but paradoxically, more divided world. At the end of this video, you will never read the passage of Genesis 11 the same way. You will find that the Tower of Babel is not just a children's story about confusing languages, but a prophetic and timeless warning about the dangers of united ambition, the unit built without God, and the search for false security in human projects. Prepare for a revelation that can change your perspective on the history of faith, the nature of human communication, and the divine purpose for humanity. Stay with us, because what really happened in the Tower of Babel is much deeper and relevant than you think, and your lessons echo to our day. To understand the magnitude of what really happened in Babel, we need to move mentally to that time and place. Imagine walking through the dusty streets of ancient Mesopotamia, a fertile and strategic land located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, recognized as the cradle of the first human civilizations. After the flood, humanity, which had been dramatically reduced, began to multiply again, according to the divine order of thirst fluctuates and multiply, and fill the earth, Genesis 9:1. However, instead of spreading and populating the planet, a specific group of people, driven by a burning desire for centralization, power, and renown, found a vast plain in the Sinai land, historically identified as the region of Babylon, and decided to settle there. They not only settled, but conceived an ambitious project that directly challenged God's will. Genesis 11, verses 1-4, offers us a crucial glimpse of this narrative. Now, in all the earth, there was only one language, and one way of speaking. And it came to be, from the east, they found a plain in the land of Sinai. And they said one another, "Come, let us make bricks, and burn them well." And they said, "Come, let us build a city and a tower whose summit reaches the heavens, and we make a name, that we will not be scattered over the face of the whole earth." This was not a simple civil engineering project. The phrase, "whose summit reaches the skies," in the original Hebrew, Rosh Shamayim, should not be literally interpreted as a tower that would reach outer space. Instead, it points to an ambition of greatness, of divinity, a monument that symbolizes human power and self-sufficiency, rivalry with divine authority itself. It was an attempt to create a power center that would not only unite humanity under a single flag, but would also serve as a point of protection against another flood, despite the divine promise of never destroying earth with water, according to Genesis 9:11-17. Most importantly, the explicit goal was, we make a name. This search for a name for fame and glory, was a direct challenge to the glory that belongs only to God. They wanted to be remembered and exalted, not for their obedience and faithfulness, but for their boldness and ability to challenge the Creator. This episode connects directly to the narrative of Genesis, where humanity repeatedly tries to usurp the place of God, since the fall in Eden, seeking autonomy and knowledge outside divine boundaries. The Tower of Babel, therefore, is not just a story about a physical construction, but a deep theological drama about human rebellion and divine sovereignty. But there is something much deeper happening here, something that goes beyond the simple construction of a tower and explicit disobedience. What was the real reason behind divine judgment? The answer is hidden in detail that few know, and which reveal the complexity of God's intervention. So what was the true mystery behind the divine judgment in Babel? The answer is not as simple as it seems, and is hidden in three crucial clues that most people ignore or underestimate. The first track is in the very motivation of the builders, expressed in the sentence, "in order to be not spread over the face of the whole earth." This statement is an act of direct rebellion against the explicit order of God given to Noah and his descendants after the flood. Faculty thirst and multiply, and fill the earth. Genesis 9:1. The construction of the Tower of Babel, therefore, was not just an architectural project, but a theological and social challenge. They wanted to group, centralize power and influence, creating a unified and self-sufficient civilization rather than fulfilling the divine plan of populating and diversifying the world. Some scholars, such as John Walton in his work The Lost World of Genesis 1, argue that the tower was not merely a high building, but a ziggurat, a common religious structure in Mesopotamia, which served as a point of connection between heaven and earth. In these ziggurats, it was believed that the gods would come down to interact with humans, and humans could ascend to approach the divine. The ambition of Babylonians, therefore, was not only architectural, but deeply theological. They wanted to control their own connection with the divine, without the need for God's mediation or will. It was an attempt to establish a man-centered cult, where glory would be for them, not for the Creator. The second clue lies in the nature of divine punishment, the confusion of tongues. It is fascinating to note that God did not destroy the tower with fire, a flood, or an earthquake, but attacked the root of his unity and power, communication. Genesis 11:7-8 reports, "Come, go down and confuse your tongue, that you do not understand one the language of the other." Thus the Lord spread them from the face of the whole earth, and ceased to build the city. This linguistic confusion forced the dispersal that they have tried so much to avoid, paradoxically fulfilling the original divine order. The Hebrew word for Babel, Bavel, sounds phonetically as Balal, which means confuse or mix. This popular etymology, although not the exact linguistic root of the name of the city, serves as a powerful biblical word game, reinforcing the idea that the name of the city has become a permanent memorial of divine judgment and the consequence of human rebellion. From the historical and archaeological point of view, although there is no direct evidence of a single Tower of Babel, as described in the Bible, discoveries such as Nebuchadnezzar's stele, which describes the restoration of a large ziggurat in Babylon, Etemenanke, suggests that the memory of a large tower and its interruption was an integral part of Mesopotamian culture, giving an plausible backdrop for the report. Biblical. And the third track, the deepest and most relevant to us today, is that the Tower of Babel was not just an isolated event in the past, but a foreshadowing, an archetype. It reveals the persistent human tendency to seek unity, security, and meaning in itself, in human projects and ideologies, rather than in God. This also explains why, in other biblical passages, Babylon becomes a recurring symbol of rebellion against God, culminating in Babylon the Great, of the book of Revelation, which represents the world system that opposes God and His will. The Tower of Babel, therefore, is not just an ancient story about the origin of languages. It is a mirror that reflects the constant struggle of humanity between obedience and rebellion, between God's dependence and self-sufficiency. Expect there is more ... This also reveals that the diversity of tongues and cultures, which today we see as an intrinsic feature of humanity, originated into an act of divine judgment, transforming human disobedience into a means to fulfill God's purpose to spread humanity through earth and eventually prepare the way to unity in Christ, which transcends all linguistic and cultural barriers, as seen in Pentecost. Babel's confusion is reversed in the unity of the Spirit. But what does all this mean to us today? How can this millennial story, with its layers of theological and historical meaning, transform our own journey of faith and our understanding of the divine purpose for humanity? But what is this millennial story of the Tower of Babel, with its profound lessons on ambition, unity, and divine sovereignty, means to you today, in the 21st century? How many times have you felt, perhaps unconsciously, like the builders of Babel, seeking to build their own tower of security, success, recognition, or even knowledge, far from the plans and will of God? We live in a world that, incessantly and often subtle, drives us to seek self-sufficiency, to make a name for ourselves, to centralize our lives around our own desires, ambitions, and projects. Whether in search of a successful career, the accumulation of material goods, the construction of relationships based on their own interests, or even in the incessant search for knowledge and information without spiritual discernment, the temptation to build our own Babel is a daily and constant reality. Does God also put enigmas or confusion in our life for a greater purpose? Just as the confusion of tongues in Babel forced dispersion, and paradoxically, the fulfillment of the divine plan of populating the earth, often confusion and dispersions in our own lives, whether financial crises, losses of loved ones, unexpected changes in plans, or even interpersonal conflicts, are, in fact, God's way of redirecting to His sovereign purpose. They serve as powerful reminders that our true security, our inner unity, and lasting purpose are not in our human buildings, however great as they may seem, but in our total dependence on Him. Verses like Proverbs 3:5-6 teach us a timeless truth. Trust the Lord of all your heart, and do not stir in your own understanding. Recognizes Him in all your ways, and He will straighten your paths. Babel's story invites us to deep and honest introspection. Where are we seeking our safety? In what towers, whether material, intellectual, or emotional, are we depositing our trust and our identity? Imagine the deep irony of Babel's narrative. What the builders tried to avoid at all costs, the dispersion. That's exactly what God used to fulfill His purpose of spreading humanity. And what they sought so vehemently, a name and a unity without God, was undone by their sovereign intervention. This leads us to a surprising and transforming conclusion. The diversity of tongues and cultures, which today is a global reality, and often a source of division, is a constant reminder of the sovereignty of God and the futility of any human project that opposes its will. The Tower of Babel is not just a lesson on pride and rebellion. It is, above all, a lesson on the vital importance of aligning our projects, our ambitions, and our hearts with divine plans. It is an urgent invitation to deconstruct our own self-sufficiency towers and to rebuild our lives on the unshakable foundation of obedience, faith, and dependence on God. It is a call to recognize that true unity and true progress can only be achieved when we are in harmony with the Creator, not in opposition to Him. Babel's lesson resonates with each conflict, every misunderstanding, in every barrier we face, pointing to the need for a foundation that transcends human constructions. This leads us to a surprising conclusion. The Tower of Babel is not just an old story. It is a timeless alert and a key to understanding the dynamics between human will and divine sovereignty. But how can we apply this truth in a practical way? In our daily lives, and what does this story teach us about the future? In short, the history of the Tower of Babel is much more than an old account of the origin of languages and the dispersal of peoples. It is a powerful theological narrative that resonates over the centuries, addressing topics such as God's unquestionable sovereignty, the futility of the excessive human ambition, and the vital importance of obedience to their commandments. Reminds us, in a striking way, that true unity, true purpose, and true security come exclusively from God, not our own efforts, projects, or buildings, however ingenious or grandiose that may seem to human eyes. The unexpected punishment that came upon the builders of Babel was not an arbitrary act of an angry God, but a strategic divine intervention necessary to ensure that his larger plan for humanity to spread, populate the earth, and glorify it, to be fulfilled, and that all glory was given to him, not the man who tried to usurp his place. I challenge you at this moment to make a deep and honest reflection on the towers you have built in your own life. Are they aligned with God's sovereign will? Or are you perhaps monuments to your own self-sufficiency, your pride, your search for a name and security that does not come from it? If this is discovered, this new perspective on the Tower of Babel impacted you as much as impacted and transformed your understanding of God's Word, leave your like in this video to help us reach more people with this vital message. Most importantly, count on the comments below. How would you apply this timeless lesson of the Tower of Babel to your life today? Which towers do you need to deconstruct to align yourself more fully with God's purpose for you? Share this video with someone you know you need to hear this message of humility, dependence on God, and the true source of unity and purpose. And if you have been intrigued by how God acts in human history, even using the rebellion to fulfill your purposes, you will love to find out about Joseph's fascinating story in the Old Testament and how God has transformed evil into good, weaving a perfect plan through adversity. Click on the video that appears on the screen now to continue your journey of faith and deepen your understanding of the Scriptures. Always remember the truth expressed in Psalm 115:16. Heavens are the heavens of the Lord, but the earth has given it to the children of men. May this truth guide us in every step, reminding us of who really holds control and glory. The Tower of Babel, an eternal reminder that true greatness lies in recognizing the greatness of the one who is above all, and to align our will with yours.